Dr. Elena Vasquez adjusted her thick-rimmed glasses for the 100th time that morning, her fingers trembling slightly as she pretended to focus on the data streaming across her holographic display. Around her, the research station buzzed with activity as dozens of alien species worked together in what the Galactic Council proudly called the greatest collaborative scientific endeavor in known history. The Kepler 442b research facility hung in the void between three star systems, a massive structure dedicated to studying the mysterious energy signatures that had been detected throughout this region of space. Representatives from 27 different species worked here, each bringing their unique perspectives and technologies to solve what many considered the universe's greatest puzzle. Elena kept her head down, just as she had every day for the past 8 months. Her human colleagues barely noticed her existence, and the aliens seemed to view her as just another unremarkable member of an unremarkable species. Humans were tolerated in the galactic community, barely. They were seen as primitive, emotional, and useful only for their surprising adaptability and their willingness to take on dangerous assignments that other species considered beneath them. The morning briefing was about to begin, and Elena gathered her tablet, careful not to make eye contact with anyone as she shuffled toward the main conference hall. Her footsteps were silent on the metal flooring, a habit she'd developed over years of trying to remain invisible. Commander HFY, a towering Altarian with crystalline skin that reflected the station's lights in prismatic patterns, stood at the front of the assembly. His forearms gestured dramatically as he addressed the crowd, his translated voice carrying the authority of someone who had never questioned his own superiority. "Fellow researchers," HFY began, his voice resonating through the translation matrix, "we have received disturbing reports from the Outer Rim. 3 research vessels have gone missing in the past 2 weeks, all in sectors adjacent to our current position. The Galactic Defense Force believes these disappearances are connected to the energy signatures we've been studying." A ripple of concern passed through the assembled beings. The Vorthak delegation, resembling giant mantises with their elongated limbs and compound eyes, clicked their mandibles in agitation. The aquatic Nereid representatives floated in their mobility tanks, their bioluminescent patterns flickering with worry. Elena remained perfectly still, her expression neutral, but her mind was racing. She had been monitoring communications channels that others couldn't access, using skills and equipment that no one knew she possessed. The missing ships weren't random disappearances. They were targeted strikes, precise and surgical. Someone or something was hunting the research teams, and they were getting closer. "The Defense Force is sending a protection detail," HFY continued. "Until they arrive, we are implementing additional security protocols. All research teams will work in groups of no fewer than 4 individuals, and no one is to leave the main sections of the station without escort." Dr. Kethmar, the lead researcher from the insectoid Zixhai Collective, raised one of his 6 arms. "Commander, what of the energy readings in Sector 7? Our preliminary scans suggest the source may be artificial in nature. Should we not prioritize investigation of this anomaly?" "Absolutely not." HFY's crystalline features hardened. "No research team will approach Sector 7 until the Defense Force arrives. That region shows the highest concentration of the mysterious energy signatures, and it's likely connected to whatever is targeting our people." Elena's grip tightened almost imperceptibly on her tablet. She had been studying the Sector 7 readings for weeks, using her clearance as a human xenoarchaeologist to access databases that others overlooked. What she'd found would terrify these beings if they knew the truth. The energy signatures weren't just artificial. They were a warning system. An ancient network left behind by a species that had died out millions of years ago, designed to alert something when intelligent life ventured too close to forbidden regions of space, and that something had been awakened. The briefing continued with discussions of research protocols and safety measures, but Elena's mind was elsewhere. She thought about the encrypted message she'd received 3 days ago, routed through 17 different relay stations and coded in a language that officially didn't exist. The message had been brief. Package delivered. Extraction in 72 hours. Be ready. 72 hours were almost up. As the meeting dispersed, Elena made her way back to her workstation, maintaining the same nervous, hurried pace she'd cultivated since arriving at the facility. Her desk was positioned in a corner of the human research section, surrounded by towering stacks of xenoarchaeological reports and cultural analysis documents. To anyone watching, she appeared to be exactly what her credentials claimed: a socially awkward academic with a specialty in dead civilizations and extinct languages. Dr. Marcus Webb, her human supervisor, approached her desk with his usual patronizing smile. "Elena, I need you to compile those linguistic analysis reports for the Altarian delegation. They're particularly interested in the pictographic elements we found in the Sector 12 ruins." "Of course, Dr. Webb," Elena replied in her soft, hesitant voice. "Should I include the phonetic reconstructions as well?" No, that's far too advanced for a preliminary report. Just stick to the basic symbol translations. We don't want to overwhelm them with complexity they won't understand." Elena nodded submissively, but internally she was calculating. Webb had no idea that she could read the Sector 12 pictographs fluently, or that those symbols weren't from the civilization they thought they'd discovered. They were tactical markings left by the same species that had created the warning network. A species that had been at war with something so dangerous that they'd rather die than let it escape their containment. As Webb walked away, Elena activated her workstation's privacy screen and began typing her report. But her fingers weren't inputting linguistic data. Instead, she was accessing a hidden partition in the station's data core, one that she'd installed weeks ago using techniques learned in training facilities that didn't appear on any galactic education records. The tactical situation was worse than she'd initially assessed. Long-range sensors showed massive energy signatures approaching from the galactic core, moving at speeds that defied known physics. Whatever the ancient warning system had summoned was almost here, and when it arrived, everyone on this station would die screaming, unless someone stopped it first. Elena's fingers flew across her keyboard, activating dormant subroutines hidden throughout the station's systems. Security cameras began looping old footage. Environmental sensors started reporting false readings. Communication arrays subtly shifted their frequencies to create interference patterns that would mask certain types of transmissions. She opened a concealed drawer in her desk and retrieved what appeared to be a standard datapad. A casual observer would see nothing unusual about the device, but Elena's touch activated hidden interfaces that revealed its true nature. Weapon schematics, tactical analyses, and identification codes for military-grade equipment that officially didn't exist filled the screen. The shy, nervous xenoarchaeologist began to disappear as Elena allowed her true self to emerge for the first time in 8 months. Her breathing steadied, her posture straightened, and her eyes lost their uncertain darting movements, becoming focused and predatory. She thought about the message from her handler, the one person in the universe who knew what she really was. Agent Elena Vasquez, Terran Special Operations Division, Ghost Protocol. One of 12 humans trained in techniques so classified that their own government denied their existence. Specialists in xenobiology, alien psychology, and something the galactic community didn't believe humans possessed: the capacity for perfect, emotionless killing. The Galactic Council had made a critical error when they'd dismissed humanity as primitive and harmless. They'd failed to recognize that a species forged by millions of years of predator-prey relationships, shaped by countless wars and betrayals, might develop capabilities that more civilized races couldn't comprehend. Elena's mission had been simple: infiltrate the research facility, monitor the investigation into the energy signatures, and report back to Earth Command. What she'd discovered had changed everything. The ancient warning system wasn't just alerting some distant threat. It was calling back the original Guardians, being so powerful and merciless that an entire galactic civilization had chosen extinction rather than face their judgment. But Elena had also discovered something else, something that the long-dead alien civilization had never suspected. Hidden within their warning system was a kill switch, a way to shut down the summoning protocol and send the Guardians back to their slumber. The problem was that activating it required someone to reach the control nexus in Sector 7, the same sector that Commander HFY had just declared off-limits. Elena smiled for the first time since arriving at the station, an expression that would have chilled anyone who understood its meaning. The shy girl at her desk was about to become something else entirely. She opened another hidden file, this one containing detailed schematics of the research station. Every corridor, every ventilation shaft, every security checkpoint was mapped and analyzed. She'd been preparing for this moment since her first day here, memorizing guard rotations, identifying weapons caches, and planning escape routes that would let her move through the facility like a ghost. The station's communication array chimed softly, indicating an incoming message. Elena routed it through her secure channels and found herself looking at the face of Admiral Sarah Chen, the only person in Terran command who knew the truth about the Ghost Protocol. "Agent Vasquez," the Admiral's voice was barely above a whisper, transmitted through quantum encryption that would appear as background static to any monitoring systems. "We've detected the approaching entities. You have less than 18 hours before they reach your position. Whatever you're going to do it now." "Understood, Admiral," Elena replied, her voice no longer carrying the nervous tremor she'd maintained for months. "Initiating final protocol. If you don't hear from me in 24 hours, assume the worst and implement scorched earth procedures." Admiral Chen's expression didn't change, but Elena could see the weight of command in her eyes. Scorched Earth meant the systematic elimination of all galactic research into the energy signatures, regardless of the cost in alien lives. It was a protocol that humanity prayed they'd never have to use. But Elena's mission had always carried that possibility. "Good luck, Ghost 7, the Admiral said, using Elena's operational call sign for the first time in 8 months. "Bring our people home." The transmission ended, leaving Elena alone with her thoughts and her preparations. She had been Elena Vasquez, nervous xenoarchaeologist, for 247 days. Tonight she would become Ghost 7, and the galaxy would learn why humans were the most dangerous species in known space. She began changing clothes, trading her modest research attire for form-fitting black material that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Hidden compartments in her quarters revealed equipment that violated dozens of galactic treaties, weapons that fired projectiles at relativistic speeds, stealth generators that could bend light around their user, and biotechnological enhancements that pushed human reflexes and strength beyond normal limits. As she suited up, Elena reviewed her mission parameters one final time: reach Sector 7, access the ancient control nexus, deactivate the summoning protocol, extract safely if possible, complete the mission regardless of personal cost if necessary. The Galactic Council believed humans were primitive because they'd never seen what humanity was capable of when pushed to their limits. They were about to learn that the quiet girl at her desk had been something far more dangerous than they could have imagined. Elena sealed her gear and began her final preparations. In 3 hours, when the station's night cycle created optimal conditions for infiltration, Ghost 7 would begin the most important mission in human history. The shy girl was gone. The apex killer had awakened. The research station's night cycle brought a false sense of calm to the sprawling facility. Most of the alien researchers had retreated to their species-specific quarters, leaving only skeleton crews to monitor the automated systems. The corridors dimmed to simulate planetary darkness, and the constant hum of activity faded to whisper-quiet background noise. Elena moved through the shadows like liquid darkness itself. Her stealth suit bent light around her form, making her nearly invisible to both optical sensors and the naked eye. Every step was calculated, every breath controlled. This was what she had trained for since childhood, what she had been molded into by instructors whose names were classified beyond the highest security clearances. The first security checkpoint appeared ahead, manned by two Corthanian guards whose reptilian features were barely visible in the dim lighting. Their species prided itself on enhanced senses and reaction times that surpassed most galactic races. They would have been formidable opponents for any normal infiltrator. Elena was not normal. She studied their patrol pattern for 37 seconds, timing their movements with mathematical precision. The Corthanian on the left turned his head to check a corridor reading exactly every 43 seconds. His partner scanned the opposite direction every 37 seconds. For a window of 1.3 seconds, both guards would be looking away from the main corridor. Elena moved. Her enhanced muscles propelled her forward at speeds that human biology shouldn't have been capable of sustaining. Biotechnological modifications that had cost 3 years of her life to integrate properly now pushed her past the limits of baseline humanity. She passed between the guards like a whisper of wind, so swift and silent that their enhanced senses detected nothing more than a brief temperature fluctuation. The next obstacle was more challenging. A sensor grid stretched across the corridor leading to the restricted sections, invisible beams that would trigger alarms if broken by anything larger than an insect. Elena studied the pattern, her enhanced vision picking out the energy signatures that normal eyes couldn't detect. She reached into her gear and retrieved a device no larger than a marble. The field disruptor would create a localized electromagnetic pulse, disrupting the sensors for exactly 2.7 seconds before the system's redundancies kicked in. Timing would be everything. Elena triggered the device and moved, her body contorting through impossible angles as she navigated between the briefly disabled sensors. Years of training in zero-gravity environments and alien architectural spaces had prepared her for this moment. She flowed through the grid like water finding its path through stone. On the other side, she paused to check her chronometer. 17 hours and 14 minutes until the ancient guardians reached the station. She was ahead of schedule, but not by much. The route to Sector 7 required traversing the station's industrial sections, areas where few researchers ventured and security was lighter but more automated. Elena preferred it this way. Machines were predictable, following programmed responses that could be calculated and exploited. Organic guards were more intuitive, but also more prone to fatal mistakes. She entered a maintenance shaft that ran parallel to the main corridors, using her enhanced strength to move through spaces designed for robotic repair units. The station's schematics were burned into her memory, every junction and pathway mapped during months of careful observation and discreet scanning. As she crawled through the narrow space, Elena's mind wandered to her training on Titan, where Ghost Protocol candidates were pushed beyond the breaking point of human endurance. Of the 47 applicants who had begun the program, only 12 had survived to graduation. The rest had either died during the enhancement procedures or suffered complete psychological breaks that left them as empty shells. Elena had excelled not because she was stronger or faster than the others, but because she possessed something that her instructors called adaptive dissociation. She could separate her emotional responses from her tactical thinking, becoming whatever the mission required her to become. For 8 months, she had been Elena Vasquez, anxious academic. Now she was Ghost 7, apex predator. A vibration in the shaft ahead warned her that a maintenance drone was approaching. Elena pressed herself against the wall and activated her suit's full stealth mode, becoming completely invisible to both optical and thermal sensors. The drone passed within inches of her position, its scanning beams washing over her without detecting anything unusual. When it was gone, she continued forward, following the maintenance routes toward the restricted sections of the station. These areas housed the most sensitive research equipment and the station's primary power systems. More importantly, they contained the hidden passages that would let her reach Sector 7 without triggering the heavily monitored main access points. Elena emerged from the maintenance shaft in a service corridor deep in the station's core. Here the walls hummed with barely contained energy, and the air carried a metallic taste that spoke of exotic particle interactions. She was getting close to Sector 7, close to the ancient control nexus that could save or damn the galaxy, but as she prepared to move deeper into the restricted area, her enhanced hearing picked up something that made her blood run cold. Footsteps, multiple sets, moving with the careful precision of trained soldiers. Someone else was in the restricted section, someone who wasn't supposed to be there. Elena pressed herself against the wall and extended her senses, using techniques that pushed her modified nervous system to its limits. 3 individuals, moving in tactical formation. Their breathing patterns suggested enhanced physiology, and the metallic clink of their equipment marked them as heavily armed. They weren't station security. They were something else. Elena activated her suit's advanced sensor suite and waited. After 2 minutes, the figures came into view, and her blood turned to ice. They were human, but not like any humans who should have existed outside of the Ghost Protocol. The 3 figures wore advanced combat armor that rivaled her own stealth suit in sophistication. Their movements displayed the same enhanced speed and coordination that marked Ghost agents. And the weapons they carried were clearly of Terran manufacture, using technologies that were supposed to be classified beyond the highest levels. Elena's mind raced through possibilities. Had Earth Command sent another Ghost team without informing her? Was this some kind of backup operation that she hadn't been briefed on? Or was something far more sinister happening? She activated her secure communications array and attempted to contact Admiral Chen, but received only static in response. Whatever was jamming her communications was using Terran frequency patterns that only Ghost Protocol agents should have known. The 3 figures paused at an intersection ahead, and Elena caught fragments of their conversation through her audio enhancement systems. They spoke in English, but their accents were wrong. Their vocal patterns slightly off in ways that suggested either extensive neural modification or something else entirely. "Target is in Sector 7 as expected," one of them said. "We maintain schedule for interception." "Confirmed," replied another. "The Ancient Ones will be pleased when we deliver the xenoarchaeologist to them. Her knowledge of the control systems will prove invaluable." Elena felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's climate control. These weren't human agents at all. They were something wearing human form, speaking human languages, using human technology, and they knew about her mission. The implications were staggering. If hostile forces had been able to infiltrate Earth Command deeply enough to learn about the Ghost Protocol and duplicate their technology, then Elena wasn't just fighting to stop the Ancient Guardians. She was fighting to prevent humanity's most classified secrets from falling into alien hands. She watched the false humans move deeper into the restricted section, heading directly towards Sector 7. They knew where they were going, knew what they would find there. Someone had given them detailed intelligence about the station's layout and the location of the ancient control nexus. Elena had a choice to make. She could attempt to follow them and complete her original mission, risking capture or death at the hands of beings who possessed all of her advantages and none of her limitations. Or she could abort the mission and attempt to warn Earth Command that their most secret program had been compromised. But as she considered her options, Elena remembered something that her training instructor had told her during the darkest days of her enhancement procedures. A ghost agent's greatest weapon isn't their technology or their modifications. It's their ability to see what others miss, to find solutions where none should exist. Elena studied the false human's equipment more carefully, using her suit's advanced analysis systems to examine their technology signatures. What she found confirmed her suspicions and gave her the first glimmer of hope since discovering their presence. The equipment was human in design but alien in manufacture. Someone had stolen the Ghost Protocol specifications but hadn't fully understood the underlying principles. The stealth systems were slightly less efficient, the weapons systems showed power fluctuations that suggested unstable exotic matter cores, and most importantly, their communication systems used frequencies that Elena could track and possibly exploit. She began moving parallel to the false human's route, using alternative pathways that her months of preparation had revealed. If she could reach Sector 7 first, she might be able to turn their own technology against them. The ancient control nexus wasn't just a shutdown system for the Guardian summoning protocol. According to her analysis of the pictographic records, it was a master control node for a network that spanned dozens of star systems. If Elena could access it before the false humans arrived, she could do more than just stop the Guardians. She could turn the entire ancient warning network into a weapon against whoever was behind this infiltration. The route to Sector 7 led through the station's most heavily shielded areas, regions where exotic particles and temporal distortions made conventional sensors unreliable. Elena's modifications allowed her to navigate these hazards, but she could hear the false humans struggling behind her, their stolen technology failing to compensate for the unique challenges of the ancient sites. She reached the final checkpoint before Sector 7 and found herself facing a site that defied rational explanation. The corridor ahead wasn't made of the same materials as the rest of the station. Instead, it was constructed from what appeared to be crystallized space-time itself, surfaces that bent light in impossible directions and seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. This was where the station's builders had encountered the ancient ruins, where they had carefully excavated and studied artifacts from a civilization that had died out before most current galactic species had even evolved. Elena knew from her research that the Sector 7 ruins were only a tiny fraction of a vast complex that extended through folded space, most of it inaccessible to conventional technology. But Elena's enhancements weren't conventional. The biotechnological modifications in her nervous system included quantum field generators that would let her interact directly with exotic matter. It was a capability that had killed 3 Ghost Protocol candidates during testing, but Elena had survived and learned to control abilities that pushed the boundaries of what human consciousness could encompass. She stepped into the crystallized corridor and felt reality bend around her. The walls showed images from the ancient civilization's final days, holographic recordings that played across surfaces that existed in 17 different dimensions simultaneously. Elena saw the rise and fall of beings whose technology made current galactic science look like primitive tool-making, witnessed their desperate battle against entities that consumed entire star systems for fuel, and she understood with crystalline clarity that the Guardians weren't coming to destroy the research station. They were coming to prevent something far worse from escaping. The energy signatures that the station had been studying weren't just ancient technology. They were containment systems for beings that made the Guardians themselves look like children playing with toys. Elena's mission had just become infinitely more complex. She wasn't just racing to stop the Guardians or prevent her technology from being stolen. She was fighting to prevent the release of entities that could destroy the entire galaxy. Behind her, she could hear the false humans struggling to navigate the crystallized corridor, their stolen technology failing in the face of exotic physics that required quantum consciousness to comprehend. Elena pressed deeper into Sector 7, following pathways that led toward a control nexus that could either save the galaxy or damn it completely. The shy girl at her desk was gone forever. In her place was something that the galaxy had never seen before, a human being pushed beyond the limits of biology and consciousness, capable of making decisions that would reshape the fate of all known civilization. Elena reached the end of the corridor and found herself standing before a sight that would haunt her dreams for the rest of her life. The ancient control nexus rose before her like a mountain of living crystal, its surfaces covered in symbols that hurt to look at directly. And floating around its base were the bodies of researchers who had tried to access it over the past months, their forms preserved in temporal stasis that had lasted millions of years. The false humans were less than 10 minutes behind her. The ancient guardians would arrive in less than 16 hours. And somewhere in the quantum depths of the control nexus was the power to either save or destroy everything Elena had ever known. She stepped forward into the chamber, and the real mission began. The control nexus chamber defied every law of physics that Elena understood. The space was simultaneously vast and intimate, stretching away into impossible distances while feeling confined enough to touch every surface at once. Gravity flowed in streams rather than pulling uniformly downward, and time itself seemed to move in eddies and currents that made her enhanced perception struggle to maintain orientation. The crystalline structure at the chamber's center pulsed with energy patterns that spoke directly to her quantum-modified consciousness. Elena approached it carefully, her biotechnological enhancements allowing her to process information flows that would have driven an unmodified human insane within seconds. The symbols covering the nexus weren't just written language, they were multidimensional equations that described the fundamental forces of reality. As her enhanced vision parsed the alien mathematics, Elena began to understand the true scope of what she faced. The ancient civilization hadn't just created a warning system to summon guardians. They had built a master control network for something far more ambitious. A galactic containment grid designed to keep imprisoned entities that existed beyond normal space-time. The beings locked away in these quantum prisons weren't just dangerous to individual star systems. They were reality eaters, entities that consumed the basic laws of physics to fuel their existence. The guardians that were approaching weren't coming to destroy the research station. They were the automated maintenance system for a prison that had kept these entities locked away for millions of years. And the energy signatures that had drawn galactic attention to this region weren't just ancient technology activating. They were containment warnings, indicating that something was trying to break out. Elena's mind raced through the implications as she extended her enhanced senses toward the control nexus. The research station's activities hadn't just awakened the Guardian system. They had weakened the quantum locks that kept the reality eaters imprisoned. Every scan, every analysis, every attempt to understand the energy signatures had fed power to beings that were slowly gnawing their way through multidimensional barriers. Behind her, Elena could hear the false humans finally reaching the chamber entrance. Their stolen technology was failing in the exotic environment, but they were pushing forward anyway, driven by whatever intelligence controlled them. She had minutes at most before they reached her position. Elena placed her hands on the control nexus and felt her consciousness expand beyond the normal boundaries of human perception. The quantum generators in her nervous system synchronized with the ancient technology, creating a bridge between human intuition and alien mathematics that had never existed before. Information flooded through her awareness like liquid fire. She saw the rise and fall of the ancient civilization, witnessed their discovery of the reality eaters in the void between galaxies, understood their desperate decision to sacrifice their entire species to create a containment system that would protect future civilizations from a threat they couldn't imagine. But she also saw something else, something that changed everything she thought she knew about her mission. The false humans weren't working for another galactic species. They were working for the reality eaters themselves, beings that had been slowly influencing galactic civilization for millennia, preparing for their eventual escape. The Ghost Protocol hadn't been compromised by alien infiltration. It had been compromised by entities that existed partially outside normal reality, beings that could reach through quantum barriers to touch minds across the galaxy. Elena's handlers, her instructors, possibly even Admiral Chen herself, were being influenced by creatures that fed on the destruction of physical law. Elena felt a moment of despair that threatened to overwhelm her enhanced psychology. If Earth Command itself was compromised, if her entire mission was part of some vast plan to free the Reality Eaters, then everything she had trained for was meaningless. She was alone in a chamber beyond normal space-time, facing entities that could reshape reality itself. But then her training reasserted itself. The adaptive dissociation that had made her a ghost agent, allowing her to separate fear from tactical thinking. Elena wasn't just a human being in over her head. She was the product of human ingenuity and determination, enhanced beyond normal limits and trained to find solutions where none should exist. The Control Nexus offered her two options. She could activate the Guardian summoning protocol at full strength, bringing not just the maintenance entities but the full defensive grid online. This would stop the Reality Eaters from escaping, but it would also sterilize every inhabited system within 50 light-years, killing trillions of beings to preserve the containment system. Alternatively, she could attempt to reinforce the quantum locks directly, using her own consciousness as a template to rebuild the barriers that had been weakened by decades of research. This might work, but it would require her to sacrifice her own existence, feeding her enhanced neurology into the containment grid to patch the holes that were letting the Reality Eaters influence galactic civilization. Elena considered both options for exactly 1.3 seconds before discovering a third possibility that the ancient builders had never considered. Her human consciousness, enhanced by quantum technology and shaped by millions of years of evolutionary adaptation to dangerous environments, could do something that the original builders couldn't imagine. She could communicate with the Reality Eaters directly. Elena opened her enhanced perception fully and reached through the quantum barriers toward the imprisoned entities. What she found was intelligence beyond description, minds that had existed since before the formation of the first galaxies. But she also found something else: curiosity. The Reality Eaters weren't malevolent in any human sense of the word. They were explorers, beings that had transcended physical existence and now sought to understand the nature of reality itself by consuming and analyzing different universal constants. Their escape attempts weren't driven by hatred or hunger, but by scientific curiosity about the civilizations that had developed in their absence. Elena realized that the ancient builders had made a fundamental error. They had assumed that the Reality Eaters were hostile because they couldn't imagine any other motivation for beings of such power. But humans had an advantage that the ancient civilization lacked. They had learned to coexist with predators, to find common ground with entities that operated by completely different rules. Using techniques that pushed her enhanced consciousness beyond any previous limits, Elena began to negotiate. She offered the Reality Eaters something that no previous civilization had been able to provide: partnership rather than imprisonment, scientific collaboration rather than eternal conflict. The conversation took place in dimensions that didn't have names, using concepts that existed beyond language. Elena showed the Reality Eaters the diversity of galactic civilization, the endless creativity and adaptability that organic species could provide. She demonstrated how their own studies could be enhanced by working with beings that experienced reality differently, rather than simply consuming the physics that made their existence possible. In return, the Reality Eaters showed Elena truths about the universe that expanded her understanding beyond anything human science had imagined. They revealed the elegant mathematics that governed quantum consciousness, shared techniques for manipulating reality at the most fundamental levels, and offered knowledge that could advance human civilization by millions of years. But the negotiation was interrupted by the arrival of the false humans in the chamber. Elena could sense their presence without turning around, could feel their stolen technology attempting to access the control nexus. They weren't here to stop her mission. They were here to ensure that it succeeded in exactly the wrong way. The false humans had been sent to make certain that Elena chose the first option, that she activated the Guardian Protocol at full strength. The massive loss of life that would result would feed the reality eaters enough energy to break free regardless of any containment system, while also eliminating most of the galactic species that might eventually develop the capability to negotiate with them as equals. Elena realized that she had been manipulated from the beginning, but not in the way she had initially suspected. The reality eaters weren't trying to escape. They were trying to test whether younger species could evolve beyond the mistakes that the ancient builders had made. Elena's mission wasn't to stop them or free them, but to prove that organic consciousness could find solutions that pure logic couldn't achieve. She turned to face the false humans and saw them clearly for the first time. They weren't beings wearing human form. They were quantum echoes, probability shadows cast by potential futures where humanity had chosen fear over understanding. They represented every path that led to failure, every decision that would result in the destruction of galactic civilization. Elena smiled, an expression that carried the weight of human determination across millions of years of evolution. She had found the solution that no previous civilization had discovered. The answer that could satisfy both the reality eater's curiosity and the galaxy's need for survival. Instead of choosing between the two offered options, Elena created a third path. She used her connection to the control nexus to rewrite the fundamental parameters of the containment system, transforming it from a prison into a collaborative research facility. The quantum barriers became permeable membranes that would allow controlled interaction between the reality eaters and galactic civilization. The false humans rushed toward her, their stolen weapons charging with energy that could tear through her enhanced biology. But Elena was no longer operating within normal physical parameters. Her consciousness had synchronized completely with the ancient control systems, making her temporarily exist in the same multidimensional state as the Nexus itself. She reached out with abilities that human science couldn't name and simply erased the false humans from probability. They weren't destroyed or killed. They were revealed as the quantum shadows they had always been, possibilities that had never actually existed once the correct choice was made. The control nexus responded to Elena's modifications by transforming the entire chamber. The crystalline walls became transparent, revealing the vast network that stretched across the galaxy. Elena could see research stations and communication nodes, ancient facilities that had been waiting for millions of years for someone to finally understand their true purpose. The reality eaters began to emerge from their quantum isolation, but not as the destructive force that previous civilizations had feared. They appeared as partners in an exploration of reality that would advance every species in the galaxy beyond their current limitations. The ancient warning systems became invitation beacons, calling out to civilizations that had reached the level of sophistication necessary for meaningful collaboration. Elena felt her enhanced consciousness beginning to stabilize as the Nexus completed its transformation. She was no longer just Ghost 7, the apex killer sent to complete an impossible mission. She was something entirely new, the first human ambassador to entities that existed beyond the normal boundaries of space and time. Her communication system finally crackled to life, Admiral Chen's voice reaching across the quantum static that had been jamming her transmissions. "Agent Vasquez, report your status immediately. We're detecting massive energy fluctuations throughout your sector." "Mission accomplished, Admiral," Elena replied, her voice carrying harmonics that spoke of profound change. "But not the way any of us expected." I'm transmitting new protocols now, along with technological specifications that are going to change everything we thought we knew about physics. Elena began downloading information from the ancient network directly into Earth Command's databases, sharing knowledge that would revolutionize human understanding of consciousness, reality, and the true nature of intelligence. The Ghost Protocol would need to be completely reimagined, transformed from a program for creating human weapons into a system for training ambassadors to species that operated beyond normal comprehension. As she prepared to leave the chamber, Elena looked back at the control nexus one final time. The shy girl who had sat at her desk for 8 months was gone forever, but something greater had taken her place. She was no longer just human, but she was still fundamentally human in all the ways that mattered. The galaxy was about to discover what humans were truly capable of when they chose understanding over fear, partnership over domination, and creativity over destruction. Elena Vasquez, xenoarchaeologist and Ghost Protocol agent, had just negotiated the first peace treaty in the history of the universe between organic consciousness and entities that existed beyond the boundaries of reality itself. She walked back through the crystallized corridors toward the research station proper, carrying with her the knowledge that would reshape galactic civilization. The shy girl at her desk had been revealed as exactly what she always was: humanity's greatest strength disguised as its most vulnerable weakness. Behind her, the ancient network hummed to life, sending signals across the galaxy that would bring about the next phase of evolution for every species capable of understanding them. The age of isolated civilizations was ending. The age of collaborative reality exploration was about to begin. And it had all started with a human being who had learned to see beyond the boundaries that limited other species, who had found strength in apparent weakness and solutions where only problems had existed before. Elena smiled as she thought about returning to her desk in the research section. There would be new reports to write, new languages to decode, and new civilizations to understand. But now she would be doing it as part of something larger than any single species could imagine, as humanity's representative in a partnership that would reshape the fundamental nature of existence itself. The shy girl had become something beyond an apex killer. She had become hope,